the labor-leisure trade-off, part of our lecture series on labor supply. In this video, we will discuss how workers choose how many hours to work, and use that discussion to talk about how we, because we're all workers, value leisure. Labor supply is studying how much a consumer or worker chooses to work. Again, I want to recall a previous video that in the world of labor supply, things are flipped around in that the consumers are the workers who are supplying labor, and the firms who are hiring the workers are demanding labor. So the normal way we think about this, with the firms supplying and the consumers demanding, is flipped around when we talk about labor supply in our model. It used to be that we had to spend a lot of time justifying how workers could choose the number of hours they worked, because most jobs didn't work that way. Workers could work only a set number of hours. Sometimes unions set how many hours they could work. Most of the time, their supervisors set how many hours they could work. But now, in our current world, this function of the model, this feature of the model, has become a strength, because now many more people are self-employed, or part of the gig economy, or making work decisions about working or staying home. And basically, everyone's thinking harder about working versus not working. And this is where our labor supply and our labor-leisure trade-off comes into question. So we know what labor is, but what's leisure? Leisure we call the amount of time not spent at work. So either you're at work or you're at leisure. Now, some of you may realize already, this term is extremely problematic and very much patriarchal, in the sense of men who work or are just like lazing around watching TV. Of course, there's a lot of non-work stuff that happens in a household, and non-work stuff that happens just for a person. People might have volunteer work. People might have religious obligations. People might have other things going on that aren't work, but are not leisure either. Yet the name has stuck, and that's what we're calling this, the labor-leisure trade-off. I don't know what else we could call it. Maybe we could call it the work-non-work trade-off, but I'm already trying to fix dead weight loss, so I can't really fix that too. You already know from earlier in this class how to value your leisure. How would you decide on a value for an hour of leisure, an hour of not working? Let me have you think about that for a second. You know that you can value your leisure because the opportunity cost of leisure is at least the wage you could earn when you work. And this idea that the wage can also be your leisure value works the other way around. In other words, we could think about the rational rule for working an hour. The rational rule for working an hour, you remember, is you should work another hour if the marginal benefit of working that hour is greater than or equal to the marginal cost of not working that hour. So marginal benefit here is the wage you would earn for working, and marginal cost is the opportunity cost that you incur from not resting or not doing other non-work things for an hour. So in both these cases, the wage determines not just the value of our work, but also provides a floor for the value of our leisure. Sometimes we may value leisure even more if we're very tired, if there's something we want to see or something we want to do. We might value leisure much more. You might wonder if leisure is a normal good or if it may be an inferior good. And this is a tricky question, actually, because it kind of depends. If a worker's wage increases, the number of hours they work could increase or they could decrease. And it goes back to whether that worker values income more or less than they value leisure. Let me illustrate what I'm saying here. There are 4 really great textbook graphs right all at once, and I'm going to show you the last one here. Sometimes this can mean that an individual supplies labor in sort of a backwards bending supply curve. You think about all the supply curves we drew. All the supply curves we drew were a straight line down, but in this case, this might just be like a weird backward curving curve that might happen in case If at some point the worker values income more than leisure, but then after a certain point values leisure more than income. You may notice this section A. I'm going to tell you more about this section A in my next video. Now, could someone really have this kind of strange looking supply curve? Well, think about it yourself. You can conduct your own thought experiment. Imagine you have a part-time job and you can work as many or as few hours as you want. Suddenly, your wage is raised to $200 an hour and all the other prices stay the same. So it's not inflation, it's just that you get a massive bump in your wage. Are you going to choose to work more or are you going to choose to work less? If you think about that for a second, your answer might surprise you, or it might not. So, you have your own thought experiment, but we also have some empirical evidence where we see in New York City, taxi and rideshare drivers, when the weather is bad and their income would increase because they'd have more fares and so their hourly wage would go up. What we see is not that they work more hours, the majority of them. We see instead that they work enough hours to make as much as they would on a normal day, on a nice weather day, and then they stop. So at least in these limited cases, their labor supply curve is backwards bending. So when workers choose how many hours to work on their job, we call it the labor-leisure trade-off. We compare, or any worker compares, the opportunity costs or the marginal benefits of each option. And if the benefit of leisure is very high for you, or your wage is very low, you may be on the extreme end of this labor-leisure trade-off. And that's something that we're going to discuss in our next video. Thank you.